Hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
Good. I was wondering if
No
okay.
thanks. Yeah, Nancy sent him an email, and I also replied just saying I'm going to use the bio that's on your website to introduce you. If you'd like to be introduced in any other way, please let me know. And no response.
Okay. Are there people in the waiting room?
Nobody's in the waiting room. I think we should start maybe 3 minutes late, just just in case. Okay, cool.
Can you make me a
Yes.
co-host?
Make co-host. There we go. So as you know, there's the 7 questions. I'm just gonna run through those. I guess my only concern is just that what if he answers them really fast? I don't know. I think the earliest we could open questions is at 4:40.
Yeah.
Hopefully he can talk for 40 minutes on those questions.
Yeah, I think so. And then you can always have follow-up questions.
Yeah, Casey put in some questions about what are some of your areas of interest? What are some of your research areas of interest? And are there particular types of studies that you really enjoy? For example, longitudinal research. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
The audio's connecting. I'm so excited.
I see people in the waiting room. I don't know. Okay, those are participants.
Yeah.
Do we know if Trish is coming?
I'm not sure. I was gonna ask if you know if Nancy is coming.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Hello, Dr. Farmer.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. So were you able to get our questions? The email?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was able to get your questions.
Okay.
Shadiko, should we wait or should we just let people in?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. It looks like you let people in. I didn't do that.
Oh, did I do that? Oops. Okay, that's fine.
Back in the waiting room, maybe for a little bit.
I don't know how to do that. Oh, put in the waiting room.
Yeah. So we're just gonna put y'all back in the waiting room until 4 exactly.
Okay. Cool. So Dr. Farmer, do you want me to how do you want me to introduce you?
Well, I mean, you can go ahead and just, my name, my position at the school. I mean, that's enough.
Okay. Should I refer to you as Larry Farmer or Lawrence Farmer?
You can call me Lawrence.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Trish.
Good. How you doing, Larry?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I miss everybody, man.
Do you?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah, it is getting kind of old.
Ugh, but there's faith on the horizon there with the vaccine coming, right? We got all our fingers crossed.
Yeah. Are you in the city?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
But not a red zone.
Not in the red zone. Okay. What part of Brooklyn are you in?
I'm right by the Verrazano in Bay Ridge.
Oh, okay.
If I hang out my front window there, I can see the bridge. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, good. Good.
Yeah, I can go for walks, along the greenway there in the water. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I love it. This is my first time living here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So Hannah, you wanted me to, like, once we start, just welcome everyone, let them know we're recording, and let them know what Student Congress is, and then kick it off to you so you can introduce Dr. Farmer.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks. And then just saying, like, you know, if they don't feel comfortable with the recordings or they don't want their image to be seen, that they can just turn their cameras off.
Okay.
Right, that's what we're gonna do for now. You know what, it may be okay, we're waiting to hear this whole record, trying to be sensitive to everybody. It seems like no big deal, but there might be some people that, you know, have a problem with, like, I know I look worse on camera, I think, than I do in real life, but c'est la vie.
Yeah.
I like your garden, Hannah.
Oh, thank you. This is my online classroom. I teach online.
Okay, so should we let people in now? And we have the chat function now, so that's good.
Yeah, you know, that must have been some kind of anomaly from the last one, because I don't know. I'm gonna make myself disappear while you guys work, and I'm here if you need anything, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Professor Farmer.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good.
Good.
Hi, everybody.
How are you, Nancy?
Good, good. How are you, Shadiqua?
Good. Just I'm trying to let everyone in right now.
Yeah.
Excited. We have the chat function now.
Yeah.
Hi, Professor Waxney. I didn't realize I was going to see you. It's
Hi.
Shanae.
How are you? Right now with my overgrown hair, but you're seeing me. Oh.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask everyone to mute. We're gonna start. Welcome everyone. Also, just to let you know, we are recording this. So if you don't want to be on camera, feel free to turn it off. This is the second Teacher Talks. The Student Congress Academic Development Committee came up with this as a way to engage with the students as well as the faculty and just learn more about different areas of social work. So Student Congress is an engagement and advocacy group, basically. So we interact primarily through our Slack group as well as our Instagram page. I can get the link to that and post it later in the chat. And we come together to discuss everything from random casual topics to projects like the Teacher Talk series. So we have the Academic Development Committee, I forgot the committees. It was like the Academic Development Committee,
Communication,
Diversity and Inclusion, Communities Engagement. So we also have coffee, cocktails and tea, which is basically a little hangout session just for students to get together on Fridays as well as Saturdays. So again, if you want to join us and be directly or indirectly involved, just follow our Instagram page and join our Slack group. And both of those things will be posted in the comment in the chat section. And with that, I will hand it off to Hannah, who's going to introduce our panelists for today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Hannah. I'm a second year MSW student involved in Student Congress. First of all, I really want to thank Professor Lawrence Farmer for joining us today. So this is Professor Lawrence Farmer, He is a professor at Fordham University in Graduate School of Social Service. He is also the director of the doctoral program at Fordham. So today we're just going to engage in conversations and some questions about, research and social work, and also about the PhD program specifically at Fordham. And at the end, we'll leave about 15 or 20 minutes for questions. So as we go throughout, this hour, you can be thinking about your questions, and you can feel free at the end to, share your questions, or at any point you can put your questions in the chat box. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Professor Farmer. I know I did a brief introduction, but we'd love to know a little bit more about you. If you could just introduce yourself a little bit further, and maybe share your interest in social work, and specifically social work involved in research.
Well, good afternoon. I want to thank the student organization for inviting me to do this talk today. I really sort of value the opportunity to interact with students, and in particular, because I'm director of the doctoral program, to talk with students about doctoral education. And I got a series of questions to respond to, and to make sure that I respond to them and to give you something to sort of take away, I did do a little PowerPoint. I'm not going to go through all the slides in my PowerPoint, but I wanted to just make sure I cover the questions that people ask. So I'm going to go through some of them, and feel free to, note some questions you may have, or if during anything I say you want me to stop and elaborate on anything, just feel free to do so. So I'm going to share my slide.
And also, sorry, I forgot to mention this before. This webinar is being recorded, so if anyone doesn't feel comfortable with, their video being on camera, you can just turn off your camera and continue to participate that way. Thank you.
Okay. So again, my name is Lawrence Farmer. Technically, my first name is actually Gregory, but I go by Lawrence. And so if you actually look me up in the system, it will say Gregory Farmer instead of Lawrence Farmer, but that's me. All right. So the first question I had that I wanted to just respond to was, I got the question in terms of what my interests are, and a little bit about, who I am and my background. Again, I'm an associate professor here at the school. I've been here now, this is going on my 16th year here at the school. Prior to Fordham, I was on faculty of the School of Social Work at Rutgers University for 7 years prior to coming to Fordham. I got my PhD at Florida International University, my MSW, and my BS at University of Pittsburgh. My areas of practice experience, I've had the fortune and opportunity to have practice experience both in public health. I was a public health social worker with maternal and child health in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, during the time I was getting my MSW. And I also did work in mental health and in school social work. A little bit about, again, my area of interest. I really sort of, overall, my work has really sort of always focused on this issue of youth development and the things that really contribute to youth being successful in their own sort of development, health, well-being. In terms of how that related to an area of practice that I sort of focused my research on, it related to school social work practice, which became sort of an area of emphasis that my practice-oriented research has sort of focused on, the area of school social work practice. Okay. Why did I want to get involved in social work research? And really what motivated me, I think, when I think about it, was sort of two broad areas. First was my desire to really address some research questions that sort of motivated me throughout even before I came in to get my undergraduate degree. I was very interested in issues in terms of what are the things that contribute to how well students, individuals, able to sort of navigate education systems, in particular public education. I grew up in New York City. I grew up going to public schools, at all levels of elementary, middle, senior high school. And I was always fascinated with why some individuals were very successful in navigating complex school environments and other individuals were not. So that was one of the things that motivated me to want to go on and do research. The other issue is just in general, what sort of contributes to positive emotional health, right? Or positive mental health or well-being. Those were two really broad areas that I was always sort of interested in, and that motivated me to want to get engaged in research around that. The other area was just my desire to be a professor, to be teaching at the university level. I was always very interested in, I had the opportunity as a high school sophomore to actually take a college course it was actually a psychology course in psychopathology is what the course was called. And I just get very fascinated with, the opportunity to be on a college campus and to, in a way, have that life as a college instructor. So that teaching at the university level was something that also motivated me to get my PhD. And then the other thing is that I always enjoyed just analyzing data. That was another thing that motivated me, was being involved with the analysis of data and using data. Those were the other areas that really motivated my desire to go on and to join in sort of an academic sort of endeavor. The next question that was asked was really focused again on what are my particular focuses of my area of research, what kind of methodologies have I focused on. And I would say again, overall, I've been interested in issues around youth, social emotional development, measurement, in particular quantitative measurement. I had the opportunity as an undergraduate to work with a psychometrician and just got really fascinated with the whole issue of how do we develop reliable and valid measurement instruments and the analysis of measurement instruments. So measurement became an issue, and along with that, really focused on advanced quantitative methodologies that are used to analyze data in the context of measurement. Intervention research, implementation science, in relationship to the promotion of evidence-based practice in social work, and then school social work practice. These are just some of the areas that have sort of, again, shaped both the methodologies, but also the substantive areas of my research. This next question was really focused, I thought, on, why Fordham's PhD, right? I mean, what's unique about Fordham's PhD program? And the first thing I'll say to students, whenever I get an applicant that asks me about Fordham and why Fordham and what's good, what would motivate someone to come to Fordham, the first thing I would say to them is that in general, I think what motivates or should motivate, what should motivate someone to choose any particular PhD program is who's on the faculty. Because the PhD program, I think, the real valuable experiences you're getting in a PhD program really come from your opportunity to work with faculty intimately on their area of research, get their substantive knowledge and experience as a researcher, as a scholar. So one of the things that I always sort of say to students about Fordham is that what makes us unique is the variety of areas of research that our faculty are engaged in, right? You know, and this is just sort of a sample. If you just sort of quickly look at some of the work that our faculty are doing, we've got faculty who are involved in mental health research and research that really focuses on women's health, on youth development, on community engaged research, on child welfare, on immigration and forced migration, on comparative policy analysis, on human rights and social justice. And again, this is to me just a sample. This doesn't represent all the research areas that encompass what our faculty are engaged in. But even that sample really gives you a flavor of the diversity of the kinds of research activities and the kinds of experience that students who are in our program have an opportunity to get, you know, from our faculty. Excuse me. Okay. The next most important question is how are you going to pay for it, right? You know, what if you're thinking about Fordham, if you think about other programs, doctoral programs, that's an important question to ask is what's the financing look like? I can say that with regard to our program, currently, and I would say over the last 4 years, it has been the case since I've been involved in the program as a director, that all of our students receive at least half of their tuition covered, either through stipends or through what we call tuition remission, you know. So that has been, you know, the way in which we've supported our students at Fordham here in the doctoral program. And that also means that half of the tuition is not covered and that the students often, it is the case that our students often have to take out loans or self-fund themselves. The vast majority of the students in our doctoral program here are also students who are working outside of the doctoral program, and that often provides other mechanisms for them to then support themselves in the program. Okay. In addition, and I'm going to stop this for 1 second so I can see you guys because I don't see you when I put the entire screen up. But in addition, many of our students, and it's typically beyond not the first year, but within the second year of being in the program and beyond, many of our students also have opportunities to apply for external funding through various fellowships that are available through some of the professional organizations. So for example, CSWE has a minority fellowship program, which we've had over the years. We've had several students who've been able to obtain that particular fellowship program. And then there are other professional organizations that also provide fellowship programs. Typically those are not available to students in their first year. They typically want a student to at least get through the first year of their program before that. And then there tends to be other fellowship programs that may be available once a student gets to the point in the program where they're working on dissertations. So we've had many students who also get dissertation fellowships to support their dissertation research. Okay, let me go to my next one. This next question why? Right? Why do a PhD? Right? You know, what would motivate a decision to do a PhD? What are the things that students should sort of weigh in thinking about doing a PhD? Right? To me, that question really has to start with, what are your career goals, right? You know, what do you want to, you know, what is it, what's the lifestyle, what's the work life, what is it that you want to accomplish as a professional social worker, right? To me, that's a primary reason to sort of answer before you sort of seek out a PhD or take on, you know, the task of getting a PhD. There obviously are, as if your goal is to be a practitioner of social work, you don't need a PhD, right? You know, you can get your license as a social worker with your MSW. So you, unlike maybe some disciplines in psychology, you don't need a PhD to be a clinician in social work, right? Okay. If you want to go on and engage in research at the university level, the academic level, if you want to be a professor in the School of Social Work or in any other of the disciplines, you do need a PhD, right? Okay. You can teach in schools of social work without a PhD. So we have many adjunct professors who have years of experience that they bring to the classroom who teach, right? But you would not be able to be a full-time faculty member at Fordham or at many schools of social work without having the PhD. So that if your goal is to go on into academia, into teaching, if your goal is to go on and engage in social work research within the university setting, even outside of the university setting, the PhD can prepare you for that and to give you the credentials to do that. But again, the ultimate thing to sort of decide for yourself is, you know, why am I doing this? You know, what is it that I want to accomplish professionally? I think that that's the main thing to sort of consider. And then can the PhD sort of facilitate that, my professional goals and interests, right? For me, from very early on, my goal was to be in academia, right? I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to do academically oriented research and scholarship. And that's sort of what motivated me to get my PhD, you know. And for other individuals, it may not be within academia they want to engage in scholarship. They may want to engage in scholarship outside of academia. There are many opportunities for individuals to engage in scholarship and research outside of academia. And again, having a PhD will give you the skills and give you the experience to be able to do that, you know, even outside of academia. The last question that came up came, you know, I guess early this morning to me was the challenge. What's the challenge associated with being in a doctoral program? And again, and this just represents my own experience and to some extent my own opinion. The major challenge is not the coursework, right? And that across many doctoral programs, you'll see a lot of similarities in the coursework, right? The doctoral degree is a research degree. And so you will see research courses to be an integral part of the curriculum in almost every PhD program that you look at, right? Most students, my experience has been as director of this program, our students for the most part get through the coursework, right? The challenge in the doctoral program is typically once you get to the dissertation stage, that is less structured, that requires a lot more discipline and a lot more independence, right? That's the thing that is challenging for many, and where you see individuals who breeze through their coursework, but they get hung up during the dissertation phase in getting through that somewhat unstructured process, and that process that requires a lot more of sort of independence, organized, persistence. Okay. So that was me sort of covering the questions, the basic questions that were asked for me to address. And I'll open it up now for any other questions that people may have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for answering all those questions. That was definitely very informative. I did see some questions come in through the chat box, but we'll open it up to everybody. Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question. You may also use the raise hand feature if you prefer. Does anybody want to start?
Well, Hannah, I think the question in the chat box that came up was the difference between a PhD and a DSW, and why prospective students would want to choose each.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. The difference between a PhD and a DSW. Well, in the current formulation of a DSW, because DSWs are actually not new in social work, right? And in fact, the first doctorate degree in social work was actually a DSW, not a PhD. And there's a very interesting history about that. And there's an organization that doctoral programs are members of, which is called the Group for the Advancement of Doctor Education in Social Work, or GADE, G-A-D-E. And if you go to the website, there's some nice articles that talk about the history of doctor education in social work and the DSW in its early formation and in its current formation. Okay. What's the difference between them in its current formation? The DSW in its current formation is being sort of characterized as the practice doctorate in social work, right? Where the PhD is the research doctorate in social work, right? The difference really is that the DSW in its current formation, one, there's a lot of diversity in DSWs. So in a way, it's kind of hard to characterize them, because if you look at the DSWs that exist right now, there's a lot of diversity in their curriculums, right? But what unifies them is their focus on individuals that they consider to be advanced practitioners in social work, right? So the vast majority of DSW programs really target individuals who have at least 3 years of postmasters practice experience, and who see themselves primarily as wanting to advance their scholarship, their involvement in scholarship as it relates to practice. And again, practice broadly conceived. So some DSWs, it would be what we might think of as more clinical micro practice. Other DSW programs, it's more macro oriented. And there's a third set of DSW programs that are really focused on teaching, that developing scholar teachers, right, in social work, right? And so, but what unifies them is that they really see themselves as the advanced practice degree in social work, the doctorate degree in social work, right? And therefore, they focus on individuals who, as far as I know, there's no DSW program that would accept you right out of your MSW, because they expect that you've had some years of practice experience, and that, as far as I'm aware of, most DSW programs do not provide any funding for students, that students are funded through their DSW programs. And again, their orientation is less intensity of the curriculum that focuses on research and more on theory, and especially theory as it relates to practice, whether it be the macro areas or the micro areas, but it's really theory as it relates to practice, which tends to be the way in which their curriculums are oriented, right? So that's the distinction between the two of those. At this point, what's really interesting is that at this point, the thought used to be, right, if you talk to people maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they would say, for example, that, well, people go into PhDs, they're likely to then go into academia. The people who go into DSWs, they're more interested in staying in practice, right? But some of the recent statistics are really showing that a lot of DSWs are actually going into academia, or at least applying for academic positions, for teaching positions within schools of social work. So that it is not the case that, it doesn't appear to be the case that DSWs, having a DSW puts you at less of a disadvantage for getting into an academic position than a PhD, right? At least from what the more recent stats are showing, is that DSWs are getting academic positions, primarily at more teaching-oriented institutions, as opposed to the research-oriented sort of social work programs, right? But the other thing too is that, you know, there tend to be the growing number of faculty positions within those teaching-oriented institutions. So the job market appears to be a little bit better also for individuals who might be going in that direction, as opposed to going into the research one, sort of more research-oriented teaching institutions. But again, those numbers change, you know, from year to year.
Another question that came up in the chat box was, how long does a PhD degree take? And then by comparison, how long does a DSW degree take?
PhD programs, for example, our curriculum here is 2 years of coursework. Then you could take up to a year to do your comprehensive examinations. And then you got a year to do your dissertation. So 4 years, right? If you look at what the numbers are in terms of how long it takes to get through PhD programs in social work, 4 years is probably the minimum. That I'm not aware of any program that you could get through in less than 4 years, PhD. And on the other end, you've got some programs who it might take you 5 or 6 years to get through, right? So I'd say the range is between 4 and 6 years, depending on the program, right? DSW programs tend to be much shorter. Again, because their curriculum is, one, they tend to be structured for the part-time student who is working full-time, and they tend to have much more intensive delivery of their curriculum, right? And so, and it tends to be a little bit less in terms of the course requirements, right? So for example, you don't have, 2 research methodology courses and 2 stats courses typically in a DSW program, where that would be at least the minimum that you might have in a PhD program. So what I've seen in terms of the length of time, I've seen that the length of time tends to be anywhere from, I've seen one program where they say you can get through in 2 years. So I've seen one program, online program, you get through in 2 years. But most of them, it's closer to 3, right? That I've seen. But again, you could say that the range is somewhere between 2 and 3 years to get through a DSW program. But keep in mind, with a DSW program, they typically, and there are a few that are the exceptions to this, right? Most of them require that you have your master's and post-master's experience, right? But there are a few that actually you can get into without your master's and without postmasters. There are one or two that are in that sort of category, and they're primarily the online is now like, well, one is an online program. I think the other one's not an online program.
Great, thank you. Another question that came up is, I know you mentioned that for the DSW, you would need a few years, or the majority of programs require a few years of postmaster's experience before entry. What would you say is the benefit of getting some postmaster's experience before entering into a PhD versus going straight from the master's?
Well, there are two advantages of this, right? The first advantage is very practical. CSWE, the Council of Social Work Education, which accredits schools of social work, requires that those individuals who teach practice classes have to have 3 years postmaster's experience, right? Okay. So that's a practical issue. If you want to teach a practice course in a school of social work, you need that postmaster's experience, right? Okay. And keeping in mind that the vast majority of the courses in school of social work are practice courses. So if you come into a school of social work, you don't have the postmaster's practice experience, you're very limited in the number of courses you can teach, which means you're very limited in the number of schools who are going to hire you, because schools don't want to hire people who can't teach across the curriculum, right? Not saying you won't get hired, but I'm just saying it does provide some limits on that, right? If you don't have the postmaster's experience, right? So that's a practical issue. The other issue, which I think is equally as important, and some people might say more important, is that as a social work faculty person, right, you need, some people would say you need to have had some practice experience, right? So that you, when you're teaching a course, you're not just sort of teaching it from the fact that you read the book and you're a chapter ahead of the students, but in fact, you've actually had some experience as a practitioner when you're teaching courses, right? And you can bring that to the teaching of the courses, right? The other argument that some people make is that as a social work researcher, engaged in practice-oriented research or wanting to contribute have your research contribute to practice, there's value in you actually having had some experience as a practitioner, right? You know, and I think those are important things to sort of keep in mind too, right? You know, now it is the case that individuals and I have colleagues, I have friends who are in academia who, you know, went right into their PhD program out of the MSW program, but they also took the time during that time, which I think is not easy, to also get the practice experience, right? So they may have worked part-time during the time they were getting their PhD in order to get that practice experience. And so that's a possibility too. You know, obviously, you know, it can be more challenging to try to work and to also do your PhD at the same time, but it's doable, right? You know, and I know many of my colleagues and myself, I worked full-time while I was getting my PhD in social work. You know, so it's possible, but again, you know, it does make getting the PhD a bit more challenging.
Another question that came up is, can somebody become a full-time faculty of Fordham with a DSW degree, or is it required to have a PhD?
We don't require a PhD, so we don't require that individuals have a PhD. You know, I think, like, and again, many schools, I don't know of any school, if you looked at, you know, their listing of advertisements for faculty say PhD required, right? They say doctoral degree required, most of them. Now, some may say PhD required, but most of the ones say doctoral degree required, right? And what I would say is that in general, what schools are looking for in their faculty is they're looking for faculty who can teach, right? And contribute to that part of the university, the school's mission, but do research, right? And contribute to that. And that your ability to demonstrate that you can teach and do research within an area that's important to the school is going to be the contributing factor more so than do you have a DSW or a PhD, right? At this point in time.
Great, thank you. Another person asked, how many students are generally admitted into Fordham's PhD program?
Our PhD program, we admit anywhere between 8 and 10 students a year. So we make offers to typically around 10 to 12 students with the goal of getting at least 8 in there, but you know, with the hopes of getting around 10. And I would say that if you look at across, and the thing I want to also keep individuals in mind is that this tri-state area is a very unique area in terms of there are many PhD programs in social work in this tri-state area, right? So as you look at Fordham, I always tell students this too. I'd love for you to come to us, but I want you to also look around to make sure when you come to us, you want to come, you know, this is the place you want to be at, right? And you've looked at all the other opportunities around here, because there are many opportunities around here. That being said, most schools right now, 10 is probably, for PhD programs, is probably the upper limit in terms of what they admit a year. There's some schools where they're closer to 5 that they're admitting a year. In contrast, DSW programs have their admissions are much larger. You know, there's some programs that may be admitting maybe 20 or 25 students a year into their programs.
Great. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the application process? What does that look like? When do students typically start engaging in the application process? Yeah.
Typically, the application process is very similar to what you did for the MSW. It's all online. Transcripts from all the universities you've attended, letters of reference that speak to your ability to critically think, your professional values, right? Your commitment to social work, right? Letters of reference that speak to those. A resume that will speak to your experience, and a personal statement, which is really important, right? I would say. The personal statements to speak to your commitment to getting the PhD. And importantly, why Fordham? Why do you want to come to Fordham instead of going to NYU or going to Hunter or going to Columbia or going to Rutgers, right? What is it about Fordham that attracts you, right? Okay. What are your professional goals? And how does the PhD fit into those goals, right? Yeah. I can tell you the faculty look very carefully at those personal statements, right? And much of the conversation that we have in looking at applicants revolves around those personal statements, right? Okay. I always encourage students, and I would encourage you, whether it's Fordham or any other school, when you're applying to the school, because the application processes are very similar across different schools. When you're applying to those schools, look at the faculty and think about the way in which your professional interests might mirror that of the faculty at the school, and incorporate that into your personal statement, right? Because the most critical part of the whole process of getting the PhD is when you sit down with a faculty person, right, and begin to engage in research, both research that is before your dissertation and when you do your dissertation, right? And knowing, going into a program where you know that there's some faculty who have research interests that are consistent with yours, and that you've got more than one person at the faculty who you could envision yourself as working closely with around a dissertation, that's going to be the thing that's going to be in the mind of the committee when they look at your application, right? You know, as well as the extent to which your personal statement reflects your ability to think critically, and your commitment to social work values and so forth.
Another student asked if GRE exam scores are required for the application as well.
Yes, we do. The university, this is a university requirement, right? So the doctoral program, and this is true for doctoral programs across universities. Doctoral programs are a part of the graduate element of the university, right? And there are certain requirements at that level that all doctoral programs have to sort of meet. The requirement at Fordham is that all doctoral programs require GREs or the equivalent. So for example, if you're in law, it's not the GRE, it's the LCATs or something like that, LSATs or something like that. And in school ed, they have their own, but that sort of graduate admission exam is what required. Yes, we do require the GREs. The next question I always get asked is, well, how is the GREs weighted in your decision? Right, that's the other question I typically get asked. And my response to that is that there's no specific weighting of it, right? Think about the GREs as another piece of evidence that we look at, that the committee looks at when they're thinking about, can this student think critically, right? Okay. So that we're looking at your personal statement, your letters of recommendation, your writing sample. That's the other thing I forgot to say. We do ask for a writing sample as well, right? We're looking at all of that, right? Yeah, we look at the transcripts, how well you did in certain courses, right? And then we're looking at the GREs. And all together, what does that say about the student's ability to think critically, right? Okay. We do know during this time period, and this is true of many programs, right? So many of my colleagues in other doctoral programs in social work are relaxing the GRE requirements because we know that for a variety of reasons, it's more complicated to even get access to them. They've had to cancel some of the exams, testing days that would have been available, and so there are fewer testing days and so forth and so on. So many of the programs, and we too are sort of relaxing that requirement, right? But in general, it is required.
Great. Another question that came up about the PhD program is what kind of makes some applicants look more desirable than others? Is it necessary to involve publications? What sort of like preparatory work would you think is important or valuable to see on an application?
What I think makes, one of the things that I think is, and I sort of said this earlier and I'll stress it, I do think that the personal statement and the ability to students to articulate why they're seeking out a PhD and why Fordham, what is it about Fordham? And have they looked at the faculty to think about the kind of research that's going on and how their work might fit into that research that's going on among our faculty? I see that as a critical thing. And a critical part of the preparation for your application is to really research the school, right? I encourage applicants to actually reach out to faculty, talk to them about the program, right? And about their involvement in the program. Or in general, PhD and their attitudes about getting a PhD, right? And what you could do with it, right? So I see that as a critical part of preparation. We don't expect that students have had publications. MSW students have got publications. If you have one and you've had the opportunity to work with faculty and get publications, that's great, right? And that's a benefit, but we don't expect it, right? We expect to see a writing sample that reflects some critical thinking. And I would encourage students to, as you are working on those assignments and those papers, think to the idea of, can this someday be a writing sample that I would want to submit for an application, right? And to put that extra work into it to make it quality, right? You know, so that it can be a quality writing sample, right? Because again, we don't expect that students are going to have publications necessarily. If you've got some opportunities to get some research experience, right? That's going to be a benefit, that you've had some opportunities to engage with research with faculty, right? Again, we recognize that that may be difficult for MSW students who are working full time and trying to get your full-time coursework in and your field placement and all that kind of stuff to get research experience. But obviously, if you're able to do that, that's going to be a plus. That's going to be a benefit.
Another question that came up was if most students who've done their PhD at Fordham have also done their MSW at Fordham. Do you see a lot of continuity from the master's to the doctoral level?
I would not say most. I would say there was a time where more of them, when we had a research concentration, then there was more of those students who then would later, in many cases later, they would go work for a year and then come back to us and get their PhD. But right now, I would say that the percentage of students who are our MSWs who have their PhDs is probably less than 10%, right? In the group that we've had over the last couple of years. Many more of them actually have gone on to other schools and get their PhDs, and that's fine. I think there's value in, you know, you going outside of your home university to get other experiences. But obviously, you do have an advantage when you apply to us, because we'd expect that you can get references from some of our faculty. And in fact, you may get references from our faculty who actually teach the doctoral program. And obviously that's going to be a huge benefit when we're reading a reference from one of our colleagues who say that you're a great student and you deserve to be in our doctoral program. That's obviously going to be a great sort of benefit in the application.
Hannah?
Yeah.
Professor Farmer, I know that Fordham University, like almost every other college and university in the age of COVID, is experiencing budgetary pressures. Does that mean that you will be taking fewer PhD students in the coming year because, you know, since you fund them, that there'll be less money to do that?
At this point, that doesn't seem to be the case, right? So we have no plans to take fewer students this coming academic school year. And we have been really fortunate that I have not received any cut in the amount of financial aid that I'm able to give to students, right? And there's been no indication that that's going to change in the coming school year. So I'm not anticipating any change in the number of students that we enroll. In fact, I'm anticipating that I'm actually going to be able to enroll more students this coming year. That's at least right now, 11/17/2020, that's the plan. Now we'll see what happens by the time we get to June, you know, whether life is different, but that's the plan right now.
Great. So just a heads up, we have about 8 minutes left. So please, you know, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or put them in the chat box in these last minutes. Oh, another one. Oh, yeah, that question's been answered. So I guess I'll ask a question of mine. I know early on you mentioned that you knew you really wanted to do a PhD program, you were interested in academia. So thinking about like your colleagues, would you say that a majority of your peers and colleagues knew, you know, early on that they wanted to do a PhD student? In my personal experience, I know a lot of students who are like struggling with the decision. They're not sure if they really want to do a PhD or not. And for you, that sounds like it was maybe more of a straightforward decision. So I'm wondering if you can offer any advice to them, and also just what do you generally see? Do people generally, you know, feel really clear about that decision, or do you see a little bit more people on the fence and unsure?
Well, I mean, what I've seen among my colleagues, you know, and I've had the fortune, I got my degree at one university, I taught another one, and now I'm at Fordham, right? So I've had opportunity to, you know, interact with faculty, at, you know, on a personal level at these 3 universities. And what I've seen is that I've seen a mix. I've seen people who, you know, from the very beginning when they entered, you know, university at the undergraduate level, they were seeking to get their PhD, and others who were seeking to be practitioners, right? Who wanted to be social workers, practitioners, get their MSW, and then, you know, at some point in time, decided that the PhD was what they needed because they wanted to take that practice and do more research and do more teaching, right? So I've seen both of those, you know, sort of pathways to getting a PhD. I think that, you know, I think it's always a struggle because, again, you're committing, you know, you're committing another chunk of your life, you know, to, you know, being a student. And unless you like really love being a student, right? I wasn't one of the people who loved being a student. I liked being a student, but I didn't love being a student, right? You know, I think it's always going to be, you know, sort of a struggle sometimes. You know, do I spend another 4 or 5 years of my life being a student, right? You know, as opposed to getting out there doing the work that I want to do as a social worker, right? You know, so I do think it's a struggle, but I've seen some individuals, it's not a struggle, they zip right through. Other individuals, they return to get their PhD after they found that they was something else that they wanted to be able to accomplish as a social worker that they couldn't accomplish with just having the MSW.
Great. Another question that came up, I know earlier you mentioned that Fordham PhD program generally admits around 12 students and 8 to 10 usually end up attending. How many applications do you receive on a yearly basis?
On a yearly basis, we receive anywhere from around 35 to a high of around 52, 3, right? So that's sort of the range of applicants that we receive.
Great. And the next question is, what kind of personal statements are you looking for in the application? What really stands out to you as like an exceptional personal statement? Are there any like features or attributes to that?
Well, an exceptional personal statement stands out to me is when the individual has really demonstrated that they understand what a PhD is about, right? That they have carefully thought about, okay, a PhD is a research degree, right? And they understand what the curriculum looks like. I mean, you can go on the website and you can see the plan of study for the PhD program in social work, right? Just like you see the master's one, right? They've looked at that curriculum. They understand, okay, I'm going to spend a good chunk of this time learning research methods, learning statistics, right? And I'm going to be expected to not just focus on our program in particular, not just focus on theories around direct practice, but also policy, also macro areas, right? And this person statement sort of reflects that they understand that. it stands out to me when they can speak intelligently about our faculty, right? And especially about our faculty who in particular, who they've taken the opportunity to actually reach out to, right? You know, and so they can talk beyond just a sort of blurb, but they actually spoke with that faculty person and got a little bit more about their research and can now talk to how their interests might mirror that faculty's interest in research, right? Those are things that stand out for me, right? Keep in mind that most of our applicants who get admitted, they've done fairly decently in terms of their master's program. They have a pretty decent GPA and an undergraduate GPA. So that doesn't really stand out, you know, because that's sort of what we'd expect to sort of see. But it really is the quality of that personal statement, the quality of their writing that's reflected in that, the critical thinking, and their professional goals are clear. That's what stands out to me.
Great, thank you. Well, I know this just about wraps up our time for today. I'd like to know if any students have any questions, can they just reach out to you via email, or what's the best way to get into contact with you?
Email me. Email is probably the best way to get a hold of me, and I'm more than happy and more than interested in talking to people about, you know, the PhD program, both our program and any other program. I'm on the board of the Group for the Advancement of Social Work Education, and so I'm familiar with a lot of the PhD programs around the country, and I'd be more than willing to talk to that. You know, because I think we need social work faculty, right? Our faculty is aging. I'm aging. I'm not going to be here forever, right? We need to replace ourselves with good, you know, good social work researchers and thinkers. So I'm more than happy to talk with people and encourage and, you know, help you connect with people, that kind of stuff. I'm not only a social work faculty person, but my wife is also a social work faculty person at Rutgers University. And I'm more than happy to connect you with her and her network, you know, for people to talk to. So I'm more than happy to do whatever I can to support students who are interested in going on to get their PhD.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time again today. Everyone, again, this is Professor Lawrence Farmer, and it's been a pleasure spending this hour with you all. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to him. If you have any questions about Students' Congress, please reach out to myself or Shadiqua, and have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Dr. Farmer. This was great.
Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad. You
Thank
guys
you.
have a good
Appreciate
day.
it.
Okay. All right.